So those are in motion. I've added the logo for the site for Aerosent, but not OAI yet. I will as soon as they give that to me. But those are all done. So the only Expo was put on hold. So the only active proposal we have in front of us now is the QCT one. And I don't know if everybody's had a chance to read that or not. If not, it's on the core technical steering team mailing list, so people could pull that up.
So the background here is they've clearly gotten some feedback and they were responding to it.
Yeah, this is actually their second proposal. Yes, they sent it. They sent one to me and Bill requested some more feedback. So this is the first time I think y'all have seen it, but yeah, they've updated it.
Right. So Bill, do you want to chime in? I know it looks pretty promising. I know it sounds like you think this would be a good idea.
Bill on the call?
Well, he maybe.
Yeah, I'm on the call, but I didn't hear what Larry just said. It was all broken up.
So I was just wanting your feedback on the QCT proposal. I know you had given them some questions to answer.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, so I think they have a good proposal. I mean, we get a lot of benefit out of it. If nothing else, use of some nice facilities for doing, for getting ready for demonstrations and using their demo center and a lot for meetings. But also on top of that, hopefully they're going to start showing solutions of Cord because they're moving upstream in their business model from just selling boxes to providing solutions to customers, and so they want to start offering Cord solutions.
Great. So
And Bill, I can just add to that. Sorry, I'll do that. I mean, Bill, you may have said it, but it was chopping up for me. So just in terms of their facilities, there were two things I took away from their visit. They have this ability to host events, but then they also have the ability to host physical servers. So both of those things may be of interest.
So we're a little, I'm in favor of it as well, but we're a little shorthanded on quorum for an official TST decision, unless there are people in the background I don't know are on, and I see caller number 1 who I don't know who that is.
Caller number 1? That might be Donna Reinig-Wien.
Okay, yeah.
That's me.
No, well, no, I see you separately.
Okay.
Well, so the point is, by my count, we don't have a quorum on a TST decision. So let's see if we can get some consensus via email and move on. So effectively, what we have going now.
As far as process.
Yeah.
I mean, as far as process goes in emails, I mean, there has been an email sent out on the mailing list and nobody's objected. If we want to take no objections as a positive sign, that's something we can move forward with.
Well, except that I had said that we were going to discuss it here, and so people may have, but then if that was important to them, they would have been here. Let me make one last pass and raise the question. If there are no objections, we will accept and see if we get any response.
Okay. So I'll hold off until that, whatever time period you want to set.
Yeah, I'll try to do that as soon as we're done here. All right, so the next set of items are related to just Agile Scrum management and Jira, and I want to turn the floor over to Yuen just for a little bit to talk about what she has set up and what the plan is. Clearly, we're still wrapping down one release, but hopefully very soon in the new year we'll start up sprints on the new release. Glenn?
Okay, so in our previous discussions, we had decided that epics would try to represent features, right? So what we've gone and done is taking the release planning features that were in the roadmap, I've translated them into epics in the Jira backlog. So what you'll see is when you go into Jira, you'll see a set of new epics focused around refactoring XOS, refactoring the build process, platform support for eCord with appropriate priorities. They're currently at the top of the backlog list. The plan is to take the stories from the other epics and start migrating them over to those. And then anything that is doesn't fit in those, I think we need to look at it realistically and see if those should still stick around. The goal is that we'll start getting rid of all the other epics and start migrating to using these new ones. Otherwise, we know that we're missing something. There is a dependency in terms of decisions on whether eCord and Volta should move out of the Cord project, right? Because right now there's a bunch of epics around Volta. The eCord stories for eCord itself is actually in the eCord integration epic, along with a bunch of pseudowire stories. And so I think we need to figure out if eCord should be in its own project and move those stories out of Cord platform.
When was this discussed?
During the release planning, we had talked about a different usage of Jira. We're planning to do something similar on the Ono side, but we probably won't do it until the K release on the Ono side. But the plan here.
We never said that these projects will move out of Cord.
No. So we
Separate
raised.
project that you're talking about, right?
Yes, we raised the possibility of moving eCord and Volta into its own project.
When you say
Jira.
project, you mean Jira project.
Yes, Jira project.
Okay.
So this is strictly a Jira. This is a Jira Scrum organizational question. So Ali, I barely hear you. Are you one of the new callers? And by the way, if you're not speaking, if you could mute, it might help the background a little bit. Anyway, was that clear, Ali?
Hi, Larry.
Yeah. Can you hear me?
I'm at Owen Lab, so.
Okay, so you're in with that group. So Volta, should we move it into its own Jira project?
Sure, if you guys want to.
Okay, good. eCord, should we move it into its own Jira project? No one from eCord's here, but I would vote that we go ahead and do that.
One.
What's that?
That's a tougher one, but we have to consider something because as much as the integration of eCord and mCord onto the platform hasn't really happened, I'm assuming that when it starts happening, some of the features that eCord and mCord need out of the platform will be driven as features inside eCord and mCord, and then will migrate to the Cord project. And if they're two different projects, it's really hard to migrate these issues from one project to the other. So maybe you want to be careful with that one.
Why are we going to migrate issues? Migrate?
Because, for example, I don't know, pseudowires, right,
Yeah.
is a feature of eCord right now,
Right.
right? But it might become a feature of the platform.
Well, so I think it's as a consequence, it has to be recorded as a platform feature. What's happened right now is
You
that
don't know.
we have one giant eCord integration, and it's I don't know what exactly, but it's 90% eCord and 10% integration. The integration part does belong as a Cord platform. It is a feature that's needed in the Cord platform. Now, if they go off and prototype it and then show it to us, we still have to transition it. And at that point, it does potentially move from eCord to Cord.
I understand, but what I'm saying is that you don't necessarily know what becomes a platform feature ahead of time. Right now, it's all pretty clear, but in 6 months, a year, when features come out of eCord and mCord,
So I think by definition, Ali, it's a platform feature when it moves into the Cord project and out of the eCord project. Because at that point, it's not just what the eCord guys want. It would also be, and how does that affect everybody else, and what's the right, architecture, and all kinds of questions.
all I'm saying is that practically speaking, it's hard to take a Jira issue from one project and migrate it to another project unless you delete it from one project and import and start it and create it in the other project. But then you use all the tracking for it. So that's all I'm saying. If you wanna, if that's okay with you guys, then it's fine. Let's do that.
I think making it that explicit is a good thing.
Sorry?
What's the motivation of bringing your project to zero?
Yeah. Answer the question. You guys get that?
Sorry, can't hear.
What was the motivation of splitting into separate projects?
That the sprint planning is entirely independent of the platform. I mean, I'm using MCord as an example. They have their own epics, they have their own stories, they have their own stand-ups, presumably.
So, but isn't just splitting these projects out into their own Jira projects encouraging that behavior?
Yeah, but there's too many people to.
No, I understand. I'm not saying that they have to be all the same Scrum, but at some point these projects need to converge. And if we split them out in their own projects, then they're not going to converge.
I don't know. I don't know that it does need to converge. I mean, if you look at the work that's being done in the MCord area, right? 90% of it is related to MMEs and S gateways and P gateways and onboarding open source software from other vendors, right? So, yeah, there's some that's specific to the platform, but they have their own community of developers and their own community of code they're working with, right? And they need to be agile in doing that.
Okay, but you're running the risk that you don't have 3 different versions of Cord.
Well, except that we still have a release.
I don't understand that argument at all because Jira is not your code base, right? Jira is just a way of tracking these that have Jira in MCord can also represent some code that has to be brought into another code base, right? I wouldn't map Jira one-to-one to your code bases.
And I would add that the TST is a place that we make sure that we stay coordinated across all of these Jira projects.
Yeah. All right. Up to you guys.
And, I don't worry, but I'm just saying all the time you have single projects which have 3 sprint or something. What's that not official?
Apparently, Onus is moving to this one.
This one again.
I'm okay with it. I just
I don't mind, but
I think without explicit rules and processes about how things merge or transition from one project to the other, it's going to diverge. But that's something
So
me was worried about that. So
if eCord has a feature that has to be on the platform, that Jira has to be in the Cord Jira. Or does it platform issue? Why would it be in the E1 at all?
The point is that you don't know, right? So you have a new feature introduced by eCord, right? That feature turns out to be useful across all Cord platforms, and is a feature that you would want the platform to expose.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So you don't know that ahead of time.
Then you do have to migrate it.
Yes, and that's where the problems will start appearing because you lose all the tracking for it. It's just either you have 2 projects and you define the process by which you move through the process. How? Right? Or they're in the same project.
Is the issue for separate projects really just a simple way of filtering the Jira issues? Is that what we're trying to accomplish? And could that be accomplished a different way, i.e. labels or whatever?
So I wouldn't say it's simple, David, from my experience. And yes, you can do with different queries on the Jira issues, but the way that the sprints get set up is very unwieldy. Jira is not really very good at having multiple teams working out of the same Jira base.
It doesn't like having multiple sprints out of the same Jira base. Is that the issue?
Well, we're currently doing it on ONUS today, where each brigade is essentially its own sprint. Right? But I think the question is, with some of these other platforms, do they want to be more independent? MCord is very independent and is driving its own sprint. I think it's on sprint 18. Right? I think with MCord Volta, what does it want? What do these projects want to do?
I don't feel so strongly about Volta. I mean, it really is the R-Cord equivalent, which is why, sort of for symmetry's sake, I was suggesting we move it out. And right now, there is pretty minimal overlap between the two. If at some point Volta/R-Cord needs something from the platform, then that needs to be brought to everyone's attention. I think it's just a matter of kind of a consistency. So what about eCord? Is your sense that it would be? I mean, I know that there are periodic meetings that are eCord specific. I don't know how disciplined the sprinting is.
Mark isn't on the call, is he?
No. Yeah.
I think Mark needs to be involved in the decision. There is a fair amount of work to move the issues out of one Jira project into another Jira project, and yeah, you can import them, but as Ollie says, you lose some in that process. And I think Mark has to decide if it makes sense to do that now or at another point.
Okay, that's fine.
If Utah wants to speak for.
Yeah, you're right.
There aren't a lot of eCord issues.
But that's kind of the problem, that there's one gigantic eCord integration. And I would like to keep the platform feature/Epic separate from all of the services being built in the context of eCord. But we can make that work within one project if that's the way they want to go. This was really just to raise the issue, and the only argument for separating is just to be consistent. So since we've got Ali in the line, Ali, do you want a separate project or stay within Cord?
For Volta?
For Volta, yeah.
Or R-Cord?
Yeah.
I don't mind either way. I'm still not super clear about what the advantages of being a separate project are, but I'm okay either way. Either combination works for me.
All right. Well, here's an aspect of it. Yuen's going to be managing the Jira, well, the Scrum processes for us for the platform. That could be help decide where things belong. Is she going to be doing the same thing for Volta, or is it going to be running independently?
Should be handling the Scrum and stand-ups for Volta. We can discuss that. Right now, it's hard to say. The Volta team is not really following any good process because they're all rushing towards a deliverable. So probably better to talk about this next year.
From process out the window and make a date.
Oh yeah, that's right.
That always works out so well.
Are we all surprised? Are we surprised?
I think minimally what we'll do is I'll pick up the sprint planning and reviews as soon as we start Dangerous Edition. I think in terms of the stand-ups, my understanding is there is currently a stand-up today, but it doesn't sound like everyone attends it, maybe just the core platform. We need to get that on the Cord calendar. I don't see that anywhere. So I don't know how anyone knows it's happening.
It's been happening for over a year and a half now. So.
I know. I don't know what calendar.
Only the in crowd knows about it.
I know, exactly. I'm not in the in crowd. But I think we should get it on the Cord calendar.
So we should get it on the calendar, I agree. Should we just stay with the defaults of when the stand-ups are, the sprint planning, the Monday of the beginning of the sprint, or Fridays, whatever? Should we stay with the current times and just make sure we get it on the calendar?
Yes, I'll put them all on the calendar. I think we need to decide whether Mysterious Decision is releasing And can we start the first sprint on January 3rd? Right? We have that currently scheduled, and I think on the agenda we needed to figure out if Mr. Decision was ready to release.
All right, so so we will, the result here is we will get this on the calendar. We will by default stay with the current timings. And I don't mean January 3rd, I mean typically when things happen on Mondays and Fridays and at 11 o'clock. Let's move briefly to the where we are with the release. I did see a successful build happen. Is that good news?
Yeah, but I had it broken, so that's bad.
Could someone summarize where we are?
Yeah, I built a successful build on Cord Tst on Cloud Lab last night. To my knowledge, I don't know if the daily build is working yet or not on the real pod.
I think we need to see the build work like 5 days in a row without any commits on it. Yeah.
But at least we have stopped adding features, and we have one successful build on one platform, right? This is progress.
We had a whole bunch. Well, when did we stop adding features?
I think it's bug fix mode.
Go on, bug fixes.
A feature was introduced on December 15th.
Have we now stopped adding features, and is this just a matter of trying to get 5 successful builds?
Well, have we decided whether Zach's reorganization patch is going in as part of the release or part of next release? I think that's the key feature that's outstanding.
So what is the status of that?
So I'm stuck in the great old salt mine, trying to figure out how how the rest of the build process is working. The thing that I think was probably the most important from a platform's perspective was in that patch on the 15th that updated the XOS core to be using modern versions of Docker and Ansible and a variety of other things, which broke things, but it appears that we're through that. From my perspective, the build refactoring, I think I bit off more than I can chew. I'm going to keep working on that, but I think that we should probably put the serious decision in the can without changes other than bug fixes.
All right, so that's the status of right now. Only bug fixes. This will continue for a couple days before Christmas, and then we will. It's likely. It seems like a stretch that we're going to make the 3rd, but hopefully sometime that week.
So just from a process standpoint, when we say feature freeze, which we had said was the 28th, isn't that when we should not be adding any new features?
Yes, that's what it means.
Okay, I assume we'll do this for Dangerous Edition?
Well, we'll probably model it in the same way we have this time, but yeah.
I think it's.
I mean, it's it's a little bit ambiguous because there's a point at which we have been working on some things and we start to merge them, and hopefully get successful builds out of it.
But feature freeze is really when, yeah, feature freeze though. The reason why we have that data is so that we have the give to actually get the final build out, right?
Sure. I mean, we understand what we're trying to do, but we have not had rigorous processes in place. But the point is, we have now passed the hurdle of features and merges, and we are purely in bug fixes and trying to get some successful builds.
Successful builds. Recently, we've had successful builds. We have. I mean, if you look at the history,
Yeah, I just broke it.
yeah, that's fine. You can break it now. That's a break it. But if you look at the history, this is because we introduced the product. But otherwise, we've had successful builds. But anyway.
So are we realistically still targeting January 3rd?
I'd say it's probably going to be the week of January 3rd. Ali, do you feel comfortable with picking a date?
I mean, I can do it tomorrow if you want me to. I really don't.
Well, you should kind of really. We should go ahead and claim a release RC1.
The process of making a release for Cord is I've made it as easy as possible at this point. So it'll take me all of like 5 minutes to do it. Actually,
So what I would suggest, Ali, is the second we have one successful build, given where we are right now, we call one successful build and we stamp out RC1.
Okay.
From a bug scrub standpoint, do we have any blockers, or are we good to go?
I got one bug I got to fix, and after that's fixed, I think we need a successful build, and I will get the rest.
No, just tell me when, and then I'll do it. I mean, I can't keep track of all these things while developing Volta, while helping other people out.
Help other people do Volta.
David, stamp out your. If I heard David correctly, stamp out your bug and then tell Ali, and he'll cut RC1.
Yep.
All right. And we will iterate on that until we feel comfortable with it. And I
think I heard we only have one blocker, right? So it sounds like one more defect to go in.
That's my hearing.
Then we got to test and find all the other defects.
Which is fine, but I assume we're holding off. We've got a branch where any fixes that Andy, Scott, and others are doing are going to go on master, right?
As soon as we have an RC1 code. What is the process? Okay, once we cut the release branch, what is the process for identifying what is considered a bug that goes into the release, and what is the process for actually getting it put in?
So there'll be a branch for the.
I don't mean the technical issues. Someone finds a bug in Cord. What's the process to determine that this is a significant enough bug to fix in Cord 1.0 and the release branch?
Oh, so like later on, after the release.
After you cut the branch. What after you cut the branch?
After the release. After the release.
No, after the branch is cut.
Theoretically, we have a bug scrub.
What is the process of saying this is a bug that is significant enough that we want to fix it in the release?
I mean, I guess it depends on the severity of the bug and what it affects.
Right, but as a developer, I see something, I want to fix it. So you can't let me determine if it's a priority because if I find a bug in the code, I go, my baby's ugly, I want to fix it before release.
Yeah, okay, but I mean, you want to put a Jira ticket in, and then that Jira ticket. But it's not like a.
Do we need a check and balance here to figure out what's going to be put in?
So I think until that situation happens, we can do a bug scrub and talk through with the team. That's your check and balance, and figure out if it's a blocker issue, and then if not, let's get a release out. Does that work? We did something similar on ONOs. I think the thing to keep in mind that Bill keeps reiterating is this is a release train.
So we managed this last time around. I think we can come to reasonable agreements as to what is a bug and what gets postponed.
I think the difference between this time and last time is that we have more automated setups around us that can at least verify the build builds to a certain extent, not the full way, but at least, and that will make the release process much faster because we can trigger a build every as soon as one is done, we can trigger another one. I think David's question about what is deemed to be a bug that needs to be fixed, I think it depends. So it depends on several things: severity of the bug, how long will it take to fix the bug, right? And what are the systems or subsystems affected by the bug? And based on this information, we can make kind of a TST call or a smaller subset of developer call, say whether this bug should be fixed or not.
And that's part of the question. Do we have to bring any new Jira that we believe want fixed in 1.0 Does the TST have to kind of sign off and say yes or no?
If you have a Jira now, it's a bug or a story that's a bug or whatever you want to call it, that is sitting in Jira, and you want to pull it in at this point, then that has to I would nearly, if it's like a bug that's been lying around for ages and you hasn't been fixed, I would nearly consider that a feature. Nearly.
My question is, if I have some bugs found, who do we go to? We have to take TST and get them to bless it before it's full.
Yeah, I mean, I would take it to the mailing list. Take it to the mailing list. Say, I found this bug. It would take me, a day to fix. Here's what it affects. What's the call? Okay, and based on that, we can make a decision of whether it should be fixed or not.
Yeah, I guess I'm looking for who has that authority to say make that call. That's always democracy is dangerous.
Democracy.
Okay.
Americans living in
I don't live in a democracy. I live in a republic. I know how the system works.
All right, David.
Anyway,
David.
David,
I'll be the benevolent. I'll be the benevolent dictator.
Who's the manager that has the authority on it?
I'll be the benevolent dictator.
Okay. Fair enough. Larry makes the call. Thank you.
And I assume we're doing a 1.1, right? Because we still need to support Cord and other deployments on Mysterious Decision if they don't have time to move over to all the refactoring that is being done on Dangerous Edition.
Yeah, this is one. I'm going to call it 1.1 because we don't have rigorous semantic versioning in place yet.
But I think we should release 2.0.
Did the API change from the last release?
I assume. Are you guys starting that, or is Dangerous Edition going to be 2.0?
I call it Dangerous
Edition. Refactoring.
I think it's Dangerous Edition. We just have not been rigorous enough in this.
Hi guys, this is Donna. Are you guys sharing anything on the screen? I've been just staring at the Cord.
No, there's nothing. There's nothing on the screen.
No.
Okay. All right. Cool.
Hello?
Hi, guys.
Hello. We can hear you.
So the question was, if the API has changed from the last release, the public API, then by default we're at 2.0.
Yes, we should release 2.0.
Yes.
Well, except that getting terrible.
Version numbers are free. I mean, it's okay to. I mean, if we put 2 before the dot or 2 after the dot, who cares? It's just a number.
Usually, the major version number indicates an API.
No, I understand, but all I'm saying is that I'm with you.
Yes.
But what I'm saying is who cares if it's 1.1 or ultimately, like, fundamentally, I care if it's 2.0 because I think it's the right thing to do, and really, does it matter if you call it 1.1 or 2.0? From an aesthetic point of view, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I think 2.0 is correct.
I'm not going to argue against 2.0. I'm just pointing out that because we do not have rigorous versioning in place, it's kind of a moot point.
Well, at least we can pretend we have rigorous versioning in place by calling it 2.0.
Well, I would save that precious 2.0 for when we have versioning in place, which will be in Dangerous Edition.
But I mean, it still communicates something to people, right? If you release 1.1, people who have applications that are either running on the platform or running in XOS will expect the same API. I mean, that's for sure. Whether or not we have semantic versioning in place, people will just expect that.
All right, so fair enough. Scott, can you cite a core API change?
I don't know that I can cite any offhand, but there's probably things that have changed. I would have to go back and try to find them, but I would be surprised if nothing has changed.
I mean, maybe this is like a discussion for another TST call, but maybe the versioning in Cord should just always be, Cord 1, Cord 2, Cord 3, Cord 4, because at the end of the day, all the different components in Cord, one of them is going to have an API change one day when all the others don't. So what do we do?
Well, you're exactly right. And you could argue that there's a core platform and then the services. The services are going to be changing all the time, and we're going to be adding new ones. And so I was trying to focus on just the very core, which is, of course, still a little ill-defined.
If the interfaces that are used for integrating a service have changed, or the format of a Tosca file or configuration file have changed, I think it's significant to kick up the major number because it implies there's no compatibility.
So Scott, you would be, without going back and inspecting, that's pointing to code you've been touching more than anyone else.
Yeah, I would say we're fundamentally incompatible with 1.0. I mean, we left 1.0 behind in the dust, and
yeah, so calling it 1.1 to me is dangerous.
All right, 2.0. Let's do it.
Okay, just for clarification, 2.0, but no backward compatibility.
And no backward compatibility. That's right. That's where we are today.
Okay, so I mean, I would call that out.
That's why we're doing the major version change, right?
Yeah.
If it's a minor version change, we're essentially saying it's backwards compatible.
Okay, 2.0
Okay.
it is.
Well, let me qualify then. On the next major release, 3.0, you're saying 3.0 will not be backward compatible to 2?
Not necessarily.
Okay, so I just want to qualify.
Yeah.
Yeah, typically if you pick up the major version, you're not guaranteeing backward compatibility.
Okay, that's fair.
Okay, we decided something. Good for us.
40 minutes, one decision.
Okay, now to some easy stuff.
You don't know this group.
Yeah, I know. I was actually know it very well, and I was being sarcastic. Anything else on the JIRA topic that we were on before? I think probably not. All right, so now let me do some screen sharing. Because
I think the only thing is folks need to start backlog scrubbing.
Oh,
I
thank
think
you.
our
Thank you.
sprint 1 will be starting on January 3rd. So we'll hold those dates unless I hear otherwise. And then the folks can start moving their stories over to the new epics. And then we'll start getting rid of any old epics.
Okay, thank you. So I'm going to do a little screen sharing. We're going to shift gears and walk through some subset of architecture/engineering questions that have been on the table for about a month now. There's been a ton of back and forth on it. And what I wanted to do was make a pass over it and see if we can make any decisions, not necessarily on everything, but some of it I think maybe we've made enough progress on. And for those of you following along at home, there is a Google Doc, which I will cut a link to into the chat window. Oops. All right, so there are a number of topics we have been struggling to break them apart, to factor this so we can start talking about them somewhat individually. And I'm going to kind of jump around in here based on where I think we can make progress more quickly versus more slowly. And now I'm trying to find where it is. There's a very clear. I'm in the refactor the build and deploy process, and we have a very clear principle here on having a distinct line between build and deploy, where build is creating containers and deploy is deploying containers. So that's all a pretty well agreed upon principle, except there are cases where you will, in some way or another, customize a container image at runtime. And this opens up several questions. Do you literally do that, or are there other implementation choices? So there's a requirement issue. Should we be doing it in the first place? Should we allow this dynamic behavior in the first place? And then there's implementation questions that follow. And this is...
you say customized image or whatever you said, are using that in a generic sense, saying we have to do something, whether that's configure container image at runtime is really what kind of you're talking about, and there's various implementation ways to do that, right?
Yes, thank you.
One of which
right.
build a sub image.
Right. So there is some dynamic behavior. Some configuration event has taken place. The one example that gets called out primarily here is that you've onboarded a service. You've decided to spin up a new service. But there could be other triggers for this.
But that's a separate phase, right? Like, so there shouldn't be all the containers you need are built during the build phase, and they're only run during the run phase.
So
there's nothing that gets built in the run phase.
So I didn't use the word build. I used the word customize. That there's something that's happened at runtime that I have a couple implementation choices. Now you can.
No. We put out a build process for a reason, right? Like so if you put out a build process that is fetch, build, and deploy, then we kind of would like people to follow that process and not make implementation choices. So it's either you say screw all the build process and we'll make our own, right? Or you follow the build process. There's reason these things are there. I mean, it's not like they're not soft like the targets. They're there for a reason.
Well, they're there because somebody declared that to be a principle, and I would argue that every single principle will run into another principle that it conflicts with. And I'm pointing out there's a conflict here, and we have some choices. One of the choices is to revisit the principle. One of the choices is to come up with alternative implementation decisions.
Okay, well,
and I'm not presuming that we were going to violate the principle. I'm just trying to set up the fact that we have called out the distinction between build and deploy, and yet in deploy, it's really deploy and operate, and as a consequence of operating, things change. Now you can list a list of things that trigger this, and you can make different decisions for different things. If suddenly a brand new service appears, you could argue you need to go back and rebuild and then redeploy. That's a perfectly reasonable design. But I'm not willing to say that every time there's an environment change, I need to go back and to build. I might be able to address the problem at runtime.
So what, like restart a container? Yeah, sure. That's fine.
Well, I think what we've run into, I think, is that some of the containers have to be updated, or today they need extra data when a service is added, whether that's UI or database updates. And the question I think at the table is, how do we do those dynamic updates?
You don't do them, so it's not like let's take it very literally. You would invoke the equivalent of Gradle build on those containers to rebuild them. Then you would redeploy them into the registry and then rerun them through Docker. Right? So you would not have a special case in the runtime to handle the case where you have to rebuild the container. I mean, what's like we're talking about reusability of everything you built.
So that premise says that every time I have a new service, I have to go back to the Cord dev machine, do a build, publish, deploy to get the new service on board. Is that what you're suggesting? Can you understand that?
I mean, Cord dev machine could be any machine.
Okay. I personally would rather be able to build services such that I could have a build phase for just that service.
Yeah.
And at the end of that, I have a set of containers that I can push over to the registry and run it. But I don't necessarily have to rebuild my XOS core containers.
No. That's what I'm suggesting. I'm suggesting that for every service, you can call build on it. Let's say the new service, and you can call build on it. Right? And you build the service, you get a new set of containers, you push those up to the registry, and run.
Right, but I should be able to build a service completely outside of, in my opinion, completely outside of the rest of Cord.
Yeah, absolutely.
I should have a dev environment which is just for a service.
Absolutely.
And at that point, I can say publish, or someone could just hand me the containers or download them from GitHub, and I can say just run on the Cord dev, and I shouldn't necessarily have to build anything else. In my opinion. I don't believe that's the way it is today, and I don't know all the technical issues why we can't do it that way.
I mean, we could. I mean, there's nothing that stops us from pushing a container up to the registry.
So I would point out that there is a
They have to add files to it.
Yeah, okay, that's different. Yeah. There are side effects. There are side effects to adding a service base, and those side effects cause you to have to rebuild components that are not necessarily.
Well, this is where I'd step back and say, does it require us to do that? The example I posted on the comment there somewhere about that the sheet was, could the UI, when it knows about a service, rather than expect the files locally, could it make a call out, essentially a proxy to
that's part of
a UI that represents just that service UI?
That's part of the refactoring of XOS.
And could we do the same similar things for other places?
Yes.
And so you kind of have that microservice architecture communicate.
And the moment you have the microservice architecture in place, then it is much easier to follow this kind of like fetch, build, deploy cycle without having to have exceptions in either of these cycles, because you're following all the same paradigm. So yeah, we're in complete agreement. And what I mean is, when I say I don't think we should be building anything in the runtime, what I mean by that is that there shouldn't be any exceptions in the runtime that allow you to build a new container and publish it. You should be able to build those containers in independence of Cord, push them up to the registry, and run them how you see fit, and not have to have any exceptions in place. Otherwise, I mean, who knows what the hell's going to end up happening on the system? I mean, I just don't know. I just have no guarantees over what's going on. That's why I'm doing.
All right, so this gets us to the implementation choices, of which there arguably is a gray line. I mean, clearly build an image or a container is one thing, but you can load data into an existing container, and you can change its behavior just as dramatically as if you had rebuilt it, and probably encounter all the same risks. But that aside, you can quote unquote customize a container that was pre-built to specialize it for a particular use, a particular service, or whatever. I think that's still within scope, right?
I think there's an argument that's absolutely one implementation choice. So the question is, do we augment existing containers, whether that's copy files or whatever, or do we create kind of a microservice environment where those exist, where we make some architectural decisions, and those containers, rather than requiring that extra data to be local, essentially call out to service-specific containers for that data.
Scott, do you see how to make everything that you understand needs to be done, both in terms of the core? Well, I'm sorry. Let me back up for 1 second. I am fine. I'm sorry. There's a distinction between activating a service at runtime and loading the code or images for a service at runtime. And the same would go for the core. If you change the core of XOS, you would have to go back and rebuild it and, for some definition, restart it, redeploy it. Given that distinction, Scott, do you see everything else you know about the core XOS core, the various synchronizers, and all the user interfaces, that the model that Ali is arguing for will, you see complications?
So I think it comes down to the second assumption that I have on your screen there. That, you know, the first one was that we're able to do stuff dynamically. I think we all agree that, you know, we will need to be able to add or upgrade services later. It's just a matter of how we accomplish that. But the second assumption was that some containers span multiple services. So, and the ones I listed down there were the UI, Tosca, and REST containers. So I think we need to decide, is that some assumption valid, or is it not valid? Is there one Tosca container for all of XOS, or is there one Tosca container per service? And similarly for the UI and the REST, you know, who is responsible for serving up these REST APIs? I think both the designs we had in Menlo Park, you know, the one Matteo presented and the one we presented, I believe had, you know, single XOS-wide containers for those three UI tasks.
The one we presented here had a UI. Maybe the diagram wasn't totally revealing, but the UI container was, there's a UI container for the XOS core, and there's a UI container per service, and then you register a proxy with the XOS core container that would then route the call to the right container for that service, so that you could just add services without having to modify any existing, without having to kill any container or rebuild any container. You just add the service independent.
Okay, that wasn't clear. So now let's explore that just to be sure we understand it. That proxy container, it blends together access to the core, any event notification that might be necessary, and then it's delivered on through WebSocket, and it dispatches to the appropriate service container. That's
so as the service UI container comes up, it registers with the core UI container saying, hey, I am service so and so, usually by giving it like a URL path, saying anyone requesting this type of URL, forward that request to me, and I'll respond for you, or I'll respond through you, or whatever. And then that linkage is done, and then traffic and then requests can be routed to the right container. And in that way, when I add a new service, I can just spin up its UI component either independently or in the same service. It depends on the implementation of the service itself. So that I don't have to rebuild the UI container when I add a new service. It's kind of like a.
It also lets you independently upgrade the different components of the service as well as services without having to rebuild the container every time.
Right.
So if our UI is a JavaScript single-page application, this UI container is solely serving JavaScript files. Is that right?
Sure, I guess. I mean, you're asking me stuff about JavaScript. I don't know anything about JavaScript.
So I see a small problem I have reason about in this for the graphical UI. For the REST UI and the Tosca UI, this proxy system works perfectly, I guess. For the graphical UI, this can result in an application of code because I have elements that I need to add.
I could just barely hear Matteo on the phone.
Okay, I was saying that for the graphical UI, I can see some issues in having multiple containers serving the graphical UI since we have common pieces of it, like, for example, the navigation bar, header and footer, and we need to share them between the container. But
it depends, because if you configure Apache properly, Apache has a mod header and mod footer, which allows you to insert these headers and footers at any Apache server, and then you can delegate the request to another Apache service for the rest of the page. So I mean, yeah, I agree.
Okay, it's something that I have to explore.
Yeah, it'll require some research, but I see what you're saying. I mean, in general, there might for the graphical part there might be some issues. But I don't think they're blocked. No, I don't think so. You're wrong.
I may be misunderstood, but I thought that the single page application was a single container, and it's only the proxy and it talks only to the proxy. The proxy does all the dispatching.
I guess, sure. If you want to, I mean, it depends how you want to put it together. But
well, I thought that's how Matteo was putting it together.
But say that again.
There's a single page application container, and it makes calls against a proxy. It's the proxy container that dispatches across all of the back-end all of the other API containers, including the core and all the service API containers.
That was my idea. I see the value in what Ali and David are suggesting, to have different UI in different containers, so we don't have to change our core UI container at any time. I just have to investigate how this can be technically done.
I don't think what you're service what you and Larry are suggesting right now, I don't think it's radically different.
Well, wait a minute. We've got a different GUI. I mean, how do you do a common look and feel if effectively every service is offering up a GUI?
That is what I need to investigate.
There's also a best practice as well as a certification if you want, right? You can enforce some of this outside technology.
And I think
you can force some of it with technology and say, hey, look, here's a little kit to help you get started on your service GUI. Follow this kit, fill in the blanks, and boom. Ultimately, generate or automatically generate a lot of the UI stuff, table-based, if you will, for a given service. That'll work too, right? Then the service has to customize it when it's really very different than everything else.
So let's visit the Tosca for just a second as a second example. Is there a Tosca proxy that farms the Tosca file that spans service-specific data and core data models and farms it out?
What does a Tosca container do today, Scott?
Well, it's loaded in with the core.
Yeah, it's part of the UI container, and the Tosca. So the Tosca engine, what it's responsible for doing is accepting recipes, and then it runs those recipes and creates objects in the data model.
So is there an indicator at the top of the Tosca file? Well, on each service, if you will, or whatever element in the Tosca file, there's essentially a reference to the objects, right? And that reference could essentially be an indicator as to which container I call out to create those objects in the database or do something, right? So I could have it in a recipe. I could reference a Tosca object, you know, org.company.foo, and that could be somehow registered. Say, oh, by the way, when you get that, call off to this service-specific Tosca processing to create the objects. Something like that, maybe?
Yeah, I think we could probably accomplish that. So each container or each service would export its own Tosca container, and then the Tosca engine sort of handles proxying, the similar proxy thing to what we just discussed for the UI.
So a lot of these core engines become almost dispatchers, have some core capability plus dispatchers.
Yeah, that's what it is.
Yeah, because there needs to be a central thing that's doing the dependency resolution. You know that one object depends on another, so we need that central component. Plus, we need the service-specific component. So I think your design is viable.
We're losing tail. We lost him. We're coming the hour, Larry. People are just bailing.
Well, that's fine. I would like to. I'm sorry. The TST meeting is now over. This is just a continued engineering discussion for anyone that wants to participate.
So if we can postpone the UI discussion to tomorrow and the